Hello and welcome everyone out there in the Actual Tech Media audience to today's webinar. We're so happy to have you. Thanks for joining us. We've got a great discussion lined up for you today on one of the hottest topics in the world of technology today. The topic is new strategies for solidifying your ransomware recovery plan. I want to give a special thanks to our friends who made this possible, our friends from Workspot and NetApp. So thank you so much to our sponsors for joining us. Before we get started, there's just a few things that you should know about today's webinar. First off, I should mention, my name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the host and moderator for the event here. As always, we want these events to be educational. Every company out there of all sizes is dealing with ransomware. It's a constant threat. It's in the news. Companies are being hit left and right. Companies you do business with, I do business with. It's a scary time. So this event is designed to help you to solve those challenges. And to help you solve those challenges, we need to know, what your challenges and questions are. So we're going to have a series of polls during the event, and we'll also be taking your questions live at the end of the webinar. So keep those questions coming. We also have a best question poll on this, best question prize to help maybe further encourage some questions or shake some questions loose. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, I want to call your attention there to the handouts tab. It's there that you'll find a link to the Workspot ransomware one-pager. This is a PDF resource you can download for additional information on today's topic. At the end of the webinar, it'll be my pleasure to announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. If you're watching this on demand, recorded, I'm sorry, of course, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found there in the handouts tab. And then, as I mentioned as well, we have our $50 Amazon gift card for our best question prize winner. That means you have to ask a question to be entered, and we'll be selecting the best question after the event and contacting the winner via email. All right, so with that housekeeping information out of the way, I'm excited now to bring in today's two expert presenters. Welcome to Matthew Davidson, who is the Field CTO at Workspot. Matthew, thanks for joining us. You want to tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thank you, David. I'm happy to be here. My name is Matthew Davidson, and prior to joining Workspot, I spent the past 20 years in the AEC space. I led the IT organization for a global AEC customer where I championed the strategic transformation of cloud PCs from a legacy on-prem VDI solution to the cloud. And we went all in with 500 cloud PCs running GPU workloads, which is amazing to support the business needs for employees to successfully work from anywhere in the world on any device. And I not only believe in this strategy and the transformation to cloud resources, but I want to share it with the rest of the world and help other companies successfully implement their digital transformation strategy. So 7 months ago, I joined Workspot as the field CTO.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and it's great to know that you're a practitioner. You've got a lot of experience in the real world on today's topic. And then I'm also excited to welcome Mr. Brian Wink. He is the Director of Solutions Engineering at NetApp. Brian, great to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, David. So I'm Brian Wink. I've been in and around the storage, networking, and security industry for 25 years. This is actually my second stint at NetApp, in fact. I think the interesting part about this is I've designed solutions for the likes of Apple's iCloud and DreamWorks Render Farm, as well as many things in the AEC and cloud-backed storage industry. And what I'm most excited about is the opportunities that we can bring to our customers to say, how do we look at data and say, how does that data help you run your business? Not just hold bits, but what does it do to help you run your business? And in running your business, in this case, how does it protect you proactively from the threats that exist out there? And we'll talk some more about that today as well.
I'm excited to have two real experts, in the industry today on the event, here to share your experience in the real world on today's topic. So I want to kick it off with just a few statistics to help set the stage on the topic. These are just astounding statistics. And the first one is that the global ransomware protection market is expected is expected to reach $46 billion by 2028. So companies are having to spend a fortune, literally, on solutions to try to protect themselves and recover from these constant ransomware threats. And I mean, it's not just in the evening news where you hear about the big companies. Companies are getting hit with ransomware every 11 seconds out there. And, this is going down. And this is one of the statistics you don't want to go down because back in 2020, the statistic was 14 seconds. So every 11 seconds, it's hard to imagine another company's being hit with ransomware. That's how big this problem is. And the average cost that a company spends is $1.4 million just to remediate from ransomware. And of course, that's an average. Companies spend much, much more, sometimes less. But, I'm sure this doesn't include the reputational damage to the company, the downtime and what their customers and clients, think about that company and their data and their trust level after the company's been hit with ransomware. It takes on average 1 month to recover from a ransomware attack. And I don't know how many companies can, take an extra month out of what they're doing already to work on ransomware recovery. It's just an enormous amount of time and energy and money that has to be spent to recover from these. And then last statistic, and that is that 29% of companies took 3 months to recover. So, I mean, I don't know how many companies would still be in business after, if they were down for 3 months, let's say. Not many, I'm sure. So I want to start off here with a poll. We want to hear from you. We want to get your feedback. The question is, where is your biggest concern with a ransomware attack? Is it preventing data encryption of your data and potentially your backups? Is it preventing PCs from getting locked down so your end users don't have access to do their job? Is it recovering data from backups and how long that might take? Or is it recovering functional PCs and their applications? So I see a number of responses coming in. I don't want to skew the results, but I can guess here what the biggest concern might be. Matt, you want to take a guess?
Yeah, I think guessing. I'm gonna go with prevention, and I'm thinking preventing data from becoming encrypted at all. I think that would be the biggest concern. So I'm going to go with that, and then after we see the results, though, I do want to make another comment about that, David, if I could.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me share the results with everyone. And it looks like 55% said recovering data from backups, followed by 50% said preventing data encryption. What's your take on that, Matt?
Yeah, I'm not surprised to see the preventing the data encryption being kind of almost tying, right, for the biggest concern, but recovering that data. So it's not just preventing, but then recovering. It's interesting to see how the mindset of the folks on the webinar have been the same that mine were for many years. It's all about worrying about preventing that encryption and then recovering. But what happens after you get the data recovered, right? So how do you get users reconnected? There's a whole nother step of that. And it's that last piece, recovering functional PCs and their applications. I think that gets lost a lot when we all think about ransomware and what we do. I think our minds immediately go to data. How do we get that data back? And I think there's a false sense of security in all of us that says, okay, I've got my data. I can take a sigh of relief. But you can't. Now you got to get people reconnected to that data. So that's it's kind of what I expected to see. Yeah.
And what do you think, Brian?
I agree. I'm actually puzzled on how the percentages add up in this chart that I'm looking at. But I agree that I think a lot of people focus on getting the data back, but I'm in data, so data is of course very important, but data by itself doesn't do anything. And this was Matthew's point, that once you get the data back, what's that next step? and how do you actually get your company and your business and those trend lines that we're reporting to the street and everything else that we need to do to actually be successful? How do we get that back? Because in my experience, and I've taken calls from customers when they've had a problem and it's like code red, sirens blaring, lights flashing, chickens with their heads cut off running around, all this craziness is going on. And so they don't necessarily have that systematic set of steps to execute at that time. And so data is the obvious first choice. But then, exactly as Matt said, what about the apps, the desktops, mobile devices, whatever else is going on that you actually use to run your business?
Yeah, Brian, you and I were talking earlier in looking at recovering data from backups. You and I were making the comment to one another. In all of our minds, 55% of people, their biggest concern was recovering data from backup. In all of their minds, that's recovering 100%. But in a ransomware attack, as you and I were talking earlier, you're lucky to get 30, 40, maybe at best, sometimes 50% of that data if you can't recover it on your own, if you have to go ask the bad actors for that back. So that's even a bigger concern.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. And that's what's terrifying. Even if you have insurance or all of these different things, we're showing that only about 35% of the people that pay the ransom have a shot at getting their data back. And then when they're getting it back, they're not even getting it all back. So it's a real big discount that they're taking on their productivity and functionality during that time.
Absolutely. You all make such great points. I mean, I remember as an IT manager going through the disaster recovery planning exercise, and I had the sense to just sit back and relax once the kind of critical applications were recovered. And of course, someone says, well, what about the end users? What about their desktops? How are they going to access the data? So on and so on. And I kind of felt like, well, my job is complete. I got the servers back up and running in the data center. That's all I really needed to do. And I'm sure a lot of folks fall into that situation with a ransomware recovery. And I think that brings us to our first question here, which is, you've just identified that you have a ransomware attack. What's the first step? What should folks do from here? Who wants to take this?
I can take it. I'm going to put on my old CIO hat first. So I'll kind of answer first. The first thing is go to that plan, go to that ransomware recovery plan. And, what do you do? What do you do first? That's critical. Do you reach out to your insurance company and say, we've just identified some sort of attack, start getting them involved. There are some things that you don't do. You don't turn anything off. You don't shut down servers. You don't shut down workstations. The first thing we want to do is shut everything down. Let's protect ourselves and protect the organization, from what's going on. And in doing that, sometimes we create a bigger problem because now we can't turn things back on. So I'm gonna answer that, I guess, from a high level and say, as we get into this, and I know some of these other questions are coming up to discuss, but we really have to have that ransomware recovery plan. We have to have that plan identified as to what we're going to do, and we know exactly what we're going to do, and we act on it, and who's going to act on it. I mean, that's critical. Number one, having a plan and knowing the very first thing that you do is absolutely imperative, to the beginning of resolving some sort of an attack.
And I'll second that. And I would hope that and I'm sorry, there's a lag on the audio here. I would hope that while you're creating that plan, you've also created some kind of pre-mitigation steps that then you would use to execute that plan. And we'll talk more about that as well. But I think that's really important. You don't want to go in naked, if you will, to the situation and say, I've got a plan and it's just to put clothes on. It's you've got to have it all prepared up front.
Absolutely. Yeah. You've got to have the complete plan and have it well thought out. I mean, I'm curious, who do you call? I mean, you've got this plan, but are there other parties that need to be involved when you're hit with ransomware?
Yeah, there are.
I think it depends on.
Go ahead, Brian.
Go ahead, Matthew.
That lag is going to get us.
Okay, I'll take this one. It's killing me. Okay, so I would go to go to your plan, look at your vendors that you've got in place, So for example, at NetApp, we have certain products that we offer, but one of the things that we offer is actually a service around a ransomware. And so if you subscribe to that service, I would say absolutely pick up the phone, call the service, run that down, let the service do its thing for you, let those people do their thing. But again, that's part of your plan. And you certainly don't have to use NetApp. I would love it if you did, but you've got to look at what you've got in place. And I think you do want to focus on identifying what data has been compromised, and you want to focus on where the compromise came from, so that you can start to recover and start to stop at the same time, and really separate those tasks.
Matt?
Yeah, I agree with what Brian said. And, again, in my former life, we subscribed to some services. We had experts because we didn't have experts in house, but in case something happened, we had services in place that we could reach out to if an event took place, that we could immediately start exactly what you just said, Brian. And that's tricky too. You have to identify the attack and identify what's going on at the exact same time as you're trying to stop the propagation of whatever is happening. So when you're kind of running in two different directions, full speed at the same time, trying to not only identify but mitigate at the same time. So that's definitely key.
Yeah, I think as an IT professional, it would be very important to have a trusted expert, a trusted solution to rely on, so that you're not the sole person responsible for, staying up 24/7 trying to remediate and solve this, all on your own. So that's got to be comforting to be able to pick up the phone, call NetApp, call Workspot, whoever it is, to help you to get things back how they should be. And I mean, what would someone expect once they're hit with ransomware? What would we expect during an attack, Matt?
Yeah, so you're going to expect immediately for all company resources just to come to a screeching halt, which means your business comes to a screeching halt. And that has tentacles that run deep. That runs deep throughout your organization, but it also runs deep throughout your clients' organizations. Their client deadlines and deliverables, and those things don't stop. They don't take a back seat to a ransomware attack. So, being able to get things recovered in a short amount of time, when you showed in the other slide, and you're talking about, cost and reputation, and there are a lot of things that go into that. There are some intangibles that, you can't put a monetary value on. And there are things that, even having a ransomware, policy, insurance policy of it's not going to help, and as we get into, some of the other polling questions, it's just having a policy is not enough. I remember sitting down with our legal team and going through that policy to understand, okay, we're covered for X amount of dollars, but what do we have to do to actually be eligible to get X amount of dollars? What are the steps that we have to follow? And what does it cover? What does it not cover? It's not going to cover downtime. It's not going to cover loss of productivity. Those plans, because ransomware is so prevalent today, over my course of being a CIO, I have seen insurance companies start to cover less and less, and those requirements start to get more and more stringent as to what you have to do and the steps that you have to follow. So having a plan is important, but you really, really have to understand that plan inside and out, and what it covers, and what you have to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, insurance isn't going to just save the day. Brian, what would your advice be when it comes to what to expect during an attack?
Yeah, I would expect that you start to realize. I mean, there's a bunch of different things. Matthew hit most of it. That you for the most part go on lockdown, but I think there's that lead up to the attack too. They don't typically happen instantaneously. There's typically an event where encryption is happening, or whatever the criminal is trying to do, and is happening, and it reaches a critical mass that then it starts to affect the company. And so leading up, there's some anomalies that you would typically see, and we'll talk about them in a little bit. But you'll see some slowdowns up front and things like that. But I think that big company shutdown is something that you would expect to see and expect to happen. The other point that I think we should make that we didn't make earlier when you asked the question about who should you call first, we both gave our answers, but what we didn't say is if you have insurance, you should definitely be calling the insurance company first so that they can have an opportunity to maybe give you some money back.
Great point. Great point. So if I were to ask each one of you what you should or shouldn't do, just one thing, let's say, when you're hit with ransomware, what should you should or should not do, Matt?
I'm gonna start with my you should not. I'm gonna go with you should not overreact. So many times when you're put in some sort of a stressful situation, the first thing you want to do is you want to just start protecting and stop, think, make sure your plan is in place, and then act on that plan and follow the guidelines of that plan so that you're not overreacting. You're not doing something that you think in the moment is the right thing to do, only to find out down the road that you crippled yourself or you hurt yourself or your company, and it's taking longer to recover. What you should do in an attack, again, I'm going to kind of go with that same answer. Follow the plan. During a ransomware attack is not the time to develop a plan. So develop the plan ahead of time and follow the plan. Stick to the plan. I'm gonna go with that for my do and my don't.
Great advice, Brian.
I'm gonna follow. Panic is always a terrible reaction. Definitely have a plan. Definitely follow the plan. I'll say what the plan should have is strategies to identify the affected users, the affected systems, the affected data, and then how you then evaluate what your mitigation strategies are to that. This is what the plan should have in it. But to further what Matthew said, you should follow the plan. That is exactly what you should do. And that keeps you logical, unemotional, and it will allow you to solve the problem.
Great advice. Well, that leads us to our next poll question, which is a simple yes or no. Do you currently have cyber insurance? And I'll be curious to find out. One of the things I've heard about cyber insurance, we can just chat about while the audience is answering this question, is that cyber insurance is getting harder and harder to get. Have you heard that, Brian?
Yes, as I took a drink of water there, excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
I've definitely heard it's harder to get because the criminals are getting more sophisticated. The attacks that are happening and the exposure to the companies is getting much broader. Therefore, the financial payouts of the insurance companies and then how they would evaluate that exposure that they would have, and then how much money they would charge you is very great as well. Plus, there's a lot of components that the insurance companies rely on that the companies themselves execute. Everything from people, processes, and products, the 3 Ps. They've got to make sure those are in place, and it's difficult. If I was an insurance company, it's difficult to guarantee that those are in place, and so as a result, I don't really want to pay out if I don't know the right things have been done. And so insurance companies are pulling back on that.
Yeah, and like Matt said earlier, if you do have cyber insurance, you really have to read the fine print because it might not, cover everything you thought that it really covered. So let me bring up the results here, and it's pretty much split 50-50. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, it's I'm not surprised that it's 50-50. I would just say this for those that answered no to that question. I'm curious just to see why, your answer is no, why you not have cyber insurance. Not that we have to try to convince folks, but, when I thought about cyber insurance and ransomware, many, many years ago, I thought, oh, okay, we're an AEC company, we're not healthcare, we're not financial, those bad actors they're not sitting around going, oh, I want to pick on this company and they're in the AEC space. And what value does our data have to them? And as I, grew in my career and became more educated about, ransomware and what's going on, is it's not about the type of data that they're getting. It's about money. It's monetary. It's they're looking to find vulnerabilities so that they can capitalize on them. And I think we all kind of see this a little bit. Think about all the phone calls that you get from time to time where it's somebody trying to get information from you. You know, the folks on the other end of that line, they don't know who we are. They don't know if we're an elderly person or if we're a young person, if we have a lot of money, don't have a lot of money. The purpose is for them to try to call someone to fall for their vulnerability so they can get a credit card number or they can extract some sort of money out of us. And, you know, ransomware at the corporate level, it's, if you will, it's kind of the same methodology. It's about, if I can take something that's precious to you and I can encrypt it and lock it down and charge you money to get it back, that's all I care about. It's all about money for them. So we spend a lot of time trying to protect our intellectual property and what belongs to us. So I'm really curious, you know, and I'll say this in 2022, I'm really curious why that number is not close to being 100%. I mean, I feel like we've all heard about so many different ransomware attacks, and there's probably not one of us on this call that haven't gotten a letter in the mail that says, hey, your data has been compromised through some sort of a data breach. And it's out there. It's real. It's now. So I'm curious as to, you know, why that number for no is still so large.
Yeah, great question. Brian, what's your take on cyber insurance?
I think it's valuable. I think everyone should have it, as Matt said. I think you've got to be real about what it is, though. I mean, at the end of the day, the cyber insurance, if your data is gone or your workstations are destroyed in some way, shape, or form, it's not going to get them back. It's going to give you a check. And so it's very useful to pay a ransom if that's what you've decided to do. But you've got to have both cyber insurance or ransomware insurance combined with solid processes.
Great point. Great point. It's not a panacea. It's not going to fix everything. And that brings us to our next question, which is, data is the company's most valuable asset. So how do you go about protecting it? Brian, you're in the world of data. What's your advice here?
Yeah, I mean, this is a thing. I think, you know, look, I'll present some of my own technologies, not to necessarily wave a flag for my company, but I think there's important things that we do. So, for example, you know, you've got your data in a location. You've got to make sure that device that's storing it is secured properly. And so, not only solid admin passwords, but multi-factor or even multi-admin access. The kiss of death is, let's assume you have solid passwords, but an admin gets compromised. If it's single access, you're done. And so that multi-dimensional plane, and not just a multi-factor, but that multi-admin is very valuable. Once you're storing the data, you've got to make sure that you've got immutable copies of the data. So, for example, we've got our snapshot copies. We're manipulating the data with pointer-based manipulation. We've got those read-only snapshots, but then we've got layers of technology on top of that. Snap lock, for example, where it is, even if you wanted to, as an admin, go in and delete one of those snapshotted volumes, it's not deletable. Then you've got to combine that. And this is why, as NetApp, you know, we've been in the storage industry for 30 years, how we've used our technologies and our partnerships now with cloud. And this is my area of specialty now. How do we leverage the cloud to share data, to either back it up or have active copies in the cloud, but with air gaps there, such that if one gets compromised via those other protections, you've got another to fall back to. It can be made accessible immediately if that's what you want to do. It's got all the version copies. It's got all that immutability to it. But then what we also do is layer on top, you know, AI and ML. So, for example, we're watching the data. We're inspecting the data to see what are the trends, what normally happens. And a great example of that is, for example, if we're normally seeing the data or a user or a group and their dedupe factor or their compression factor is a particular number, and all of a sudden that number starts to skew. Okay, this would be somewhat indicative of of the data is being encrypted, because encrypted data doesn't dedupe, it doesn't compress very well, and so all of a sudden you start to see those numbers skew. So what the systems have the ability to do is say, hey, I'm going to block that user or that account or that group, depends on what we're detecting there. But there's ways to use AI and ML intelligence on top of that to thwart these criminals actively. And so there's that proactive upfront. There's the way you're actually just storing the data and governing it with your admin access and who has the right to do what on a system from a super user standpoint. And then there's how do you recover it afterwards. But and those are all very important to have as part of your system.
Absolutely. And what about immutability of data? I mean, that's kind of a hot topic here in the world of ransomware. Are there varying degrees of immutability, or what do we need to know when it comes to immutability of data?
I think it's really important. There's two different levels of immutability. So, and you'd think, well, immutable is immutable. It's not partially immutable, but what happens is depending on where where you've got that data made immutable. Well, let's just back up a second. So first of all, you've got to have an efficient way to make it immutable. So for example, one way would be, I'm just going to blindly copy everything to a second or third location. Okay, that would certainly work. It's very expensive, very costly in many ways. You've got to overpay for things. So we want to do it efficiently. At NetApp, we do that as a pointer-based manipulation. And we have it in our snapshot copies. It's core to our DNA. It's what was developed 30 years ago, literally at the start of the company. This is core to everything that we do. And we've got those snapshot copies there that are read-only. There's not the ability to write to them. It's not in the code. It's not like there's something that turned it off. It's simply not there. Okay, now what does exist is the ability to delete a snapshot. You got to be an admin. You got to be a super user to do this. And this is where that snap lock comes in. And so now it says, even if you are an admin, based on the policy that was previously set, there is no deleting or editing of this particular snapshotted copy. It can't be done. Okay. But furthering that, let's assume something horrible happens to the machine. It's somehow taken down, or they fry the power grid or something like this as part of the attack. This is where that secondary copy, where it's offsite, it's air gapped, if you will, is very important. And again, leveraging that knowledge and doing that in a creative way. And this is where, again, with our snapshotted technology and our block-based knowledge, we have the ability to effectively transfer that data to that secondary copy. So we're not just blindly copying everything. We're intelligently moving the change blocks. So it's very, very efficient, and we can leverage many technologies in the cloud. We can certainly back it up to cloud object storage. We could back it up to live devices running in the cloud. We can have that in multiple regions, depending on what kind of network risks you might have. And so these are all part of the options of protecting that data and part of that immutability story.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to protect that data, make sure it's not encrypted by the ransomware. And I mean, one of the scenarios I've read about are companies where they had their data, they could recover it, but they couldn't get it back in a reasonable amount of time. Like they could, recover some of it today, and they tested that. But when it came to a ransomware infection, they had to recover all their data and all their end user devices, and that was going to take weeks. And so, they were just as bad off, really, as if almost, if they didn't have their data at all. What's your take on recovery time? How can folks get a great recovery time and really know that they can rapidly restore massive amounts of data?
Yeah, and that's again where, when you're using that snapshots, the snapshots and the immutability of the data, and I'm sorry, I can't say that word today, it really goes to a productivity play, and this is your time to market, that time to recover, if you will. It's all about productivity, and this is, I think, where, in my opinion, the cloud really plays in. When you've got that secondary copy in the cloud, it's waiting there. It's either an object storage in let's call it restore ready format. What I would recommend my customers do, actually, and for the bigger customers, this is what they do. They run an actual small machine. It's wildly underpowered. It's just a DR machine sitting there, but it's ready to go. Okay. And it's got the active file system there, but it's also got access to all those snapshots. And so let's assume the active file system is totally corrupt. It's just worthless. The amount of time required to go back to a snapshot is a click. It happens in that much time. And then what you do is, because you've got it also running in the cloud as a machine, you just go to your cloud console, you say, hey, I want to upgrade this machine to a much higher instance with more CPU, more RAM, and bam, you have a fully functioning machine with all of your data within, 2-3 clicks worth of time. It's a very, very fast and effective operation. So that's if you have that solid plan up front. And we can do that. We can do that for certainly NetApp on-prem and NetApp in-cloud data. We can just do it for NetApp in-cloud data as well. But these are the strategies that I see my current customers employing, and how they're leveraging both traditional on-prem brick and mortar data centers and mating that with cloud data centers to really increase that productivity and minimize the risk of a ransomware attack.
Yeah, that sounds like a dream come true, I think, to be able to, click that button and restore that snapshot and just get that data back. What about data prioritization?
Data prioritization, again, that plays back to the AI and ML strategies. You can certainly do it manually from a volume perspective and an application perspective, which applications are writing to which volumes. But again, I would say that from a data prioritization strategy, if you're using the snapshots, because that recovery time is so fast, maybe you have to do 3 clicks, one on this volume, one on this volume, one on this volume, but it happens instantaneously. The clicking takes longer than the recovery, actually. So we don't have our customers employing strong data prioritization strategies. They typically have it in the plan. Hey, I want to get my databases back first, and maybe my user volumes or something like that. But we're talking they're done in 2-3 minutes.
That's awesome. Just awesome. Well, that brings us to a poll here. We want to poll the audience out there. What will cost you more? What do you think? The ransomware fee or the cost of lost productivity, revenue, and brand reputation from extended downtime? Pick one or the other, and I'll share the results of this with you. While the audience is answering this, Matt, what's your take on this? What do you think?
I'm going to go with the cost of lost productivity, revenue, and brand reputation from extended downtime, because one of the things that gets lost, and we talked about this a little bit at the beginning about the insurance company and what do they cover, what do they not cover. I think one thing that gets overlooked all the time is the insurance carriers are not going to cover that loss of productivity. If it takes you 3 minutes to get back up, or if it takes you 3 weeks to get back up, there's a loss of productivity. With what Brian shared, how you can treat your data, how you can use immutable backups, how you can use snapshot technology, and how you can utilize the cloud to make all that go fast. As we get into, talking about recovery, there's a whole nother piece that gets overlooked. And, as people are still, answering the poll, I'm going to ask a few questions of them. Let's pretend in this scenario that you now have your data back online. If you are a office organization, you have multiple offices across the United States, multiple regions, or you're a worldwide business, now that your data is back online, you're not done. That's not the goal line. You didn't make it over the goal line yet. You just completed one piece of that. There's another big piece, which is, how do I get access back to that data from those teammates? And typically it's the end user devices that are compromised as well. And you've got to clean those up. So if you're a global organization, how are you going to do that? If you have thousands of employees, how are you going to schedule? Is there enough man hours and enough technology talent on staff to be able to reimage all of those machines? How are you going to get people back to work? As Brian shared, if you can have your data back in minutes, how are you going to ensure that your users can get reconnected and that end user environment can also be recovered in minutes? And the answer again with that is cloud PCs. And I'll talk more about that as we get into the recovery, but I think that's a very important piece that gets lost. And that is why I'm choosing loss of productivity.
Well, I think you chose right. According to the audience, they said
the
81%. Yeah, 81% of the audience out there said the loss of productivity, revenue, and brand reputation. This reminds me, I think it was the city of Atlanta that spent $500,000 just on PR consultants after their ransomware attack to try to build their reputation back up after being down for so long. So it's incredible loss of reputation and productivity being impacted by these attacks. And that brings us actually right into this next question, which is, okay, we've been hit. We need to recover. How exactly is that going to work? Matt, I think this is a great place to talk more about specifically the end user endpoints. And you referenced cloud PCs. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so with a cloud PC strategy, you can have an environment, and this is an important part of this, an important word to remember. You can have an isolated, and I'll say that again, an isolated environment, because even if you're in the cloud today and you're using some sort of cloud PC type environment, if it's tied into your corporate network, just as your physical machines are susceptible to being compromised in a ransomware attack, your cloud PC environment is no different. It's still part of your local, network. So you need to have an isolated environment, and you can do that. You can create an isolated environment that says, that is tested with your corporate image and it's ready to go. And during an attack, you can fire that up. You can have access to tens of thousands of machines across multiple clouds and multiple regions within a matter of minutes. The important part to remember as well is you need to be able to get that end user compute environment as close to the end user as possible, right? Just like you're delivering it to them in their hands, like the days of a physical machine. And you can do that using cloud PCs. And I will, say that, there's only one company out there that allows you to do that today across multiple clouds, to be able to have this one button, that your end user would click on, and based on wherever they are in the region, and it does all that work in the background and figures that out to be able to give them the best possible environment. And I happen to work for them. So, I would say that during your recovery, it's important to focus on the data, but don't let the end user environment get lost. There's all kinds of data out there, and one of the important things to remember is that there's $1 million for downtime. That puts people out of business. I was reading an article a year or two ago, and it was talking about that most companies that experience any type of downtime for more than 3 days, it was like 98% of them, those businesses, never recover. And it doesn't matter how large or how small that business is, 98% of businesses that experience more than 3 days of downtime never recover. It's a scary statistic. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that happens to so many companies who are hit by ransomware and just never really recover. They might be back in business, but their reputation just can't get back to where it was before. What about employees? I mean, that's really what I think we want to focus on now is, okay, you got the data back in the data center, but can we go into a little bit more detail? You talked about the cloud PCs. Exactly how will the employees be accessing the applications and the data that they need?
Yeah, so they can do that through, a web browser. They can have access to that environment from any device. That's a great thing about using cloud PCs. You can access that cloud PC from any device anywhere in the world. Once your data is back online, it's just getting access to that. So you could do that through tablet devices. You can do it through, any type of computer that you can get in the hands of your user, tablet, phones, iPads. You can get access, to that data and to that information.
And because those cloud PCs were isolated, they're not infected by ransomware either, right?
That's right. Exactly. Absolutely. And, I'll throw a couple, plugs in here with what we're doing at Workspot. Again, I mentioned, we're the only solution that can do this across multiple clouds. But the important thing to remember is, that recovery time objective. There's an old term we're all used to in the backup days. So, we can do that in less than an hour, have that PC environment, that end user environment connected back to that data.
So when it comes to the benefits of cloud PCs versus physical desktops, I mean, one is the ability to have these isolated. I know we talked about the other one is the RTO, get them up and running fast. Are there other benefits we need to be aware of?
Just scale, keep scale in mind. How quickly can you do that across the organization? During an attack, everything is about time to figure out what happened, time to start getting the recovery process in place, and time to get people back to work. Because at the end of the day, it's all about that bottom line revenue. And if people aren't working, they aren't generating revenue. So it's all about time.
And I know you've implemented cloud PCs before. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how and why you did it?
I'm sorry, say that again.
I said, I know you've implemented cloud PCs before. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you did it and why?
Yeah. So for us, we needed to find a way to be able to provide. And again, there are some key words in what I'm going to say here. We wanted to be able to provide a unified end user compute environment to any employee, regardless of where they were in the world, regardless of whatever device that they were using, because people's needs change. And based on job function, people are out in the field, they may be doing a punch list or, not sitting inside the four walls of a corporate office. So that word unified was key. We needed to find a way to provide that environment that was the same for everybody, regardless of wherever they were, regardless of whatever device they were using. We had to take out issues of the old days of, low bandwidth, high latency. We had to overcome all of those. And just to throw another wrench into it, in the AEC industry, it's all about GPU. So how can you graphically get that horsepower in the hands of those end users? So that was one aspect of it. The other aspect was, how do we as a technology group get out of the hardware business? How can we start focusing on spending our time where it really counts inside the organization, helping the business grow, doing better things for our clients, not spending time imaging machines and dealing with hardware failures. At the time, we had 25 offices across North America, and it's every 3 years you have hardware that goes off leases. You're sending people out in the field. I wanted out of the hardware business. Is there a way that we can have people just show up and work, and it doesn't matter if they're in an office? Could an office be somebody's house? Could you have the same functionality that we were all used to in the 90s and early 2000s of being inside the four walls of an office building? Could you get that same experience at home or remote or in a hotel room or wherever you are, sitting in an airport waiting on an airplane? And the answer is yes, we could do that with cloud PC. So that's why we implemented that strategy. We were able to also get rid of a lot of unnecessary hardware in all of our offices. Our offices used to have a full server rack that was full of a physical storage device, full of hypervisors, at least two of them for redundancy, that were running virtual machines. And the offices now are nothing more than the number of switches to support the number of users that would be in the office, a firewall, and the number of access points needed to be able to provide Wi-Fi access. That's it. Nothing else in the office. So it's adopting a cloud PC strategy and using that, as an everyday way to work. It propels you and works as part of what you're going to need to do when it comes to ransomware anyway. Now, you can still create that isolated environment, but when your users are already used to working in a certain fashion and having access to things, whenever a ransomware attack or something happens, it's much easier to recover from that because you don't have to physically go touch all of this equipment. I talked about how do you get all these physical PCs from the end user's hands so you can re-image it? I skipped over an important piece. Brian, I see you shaking your head. I think you know where I'm going. How do you get in all of your data centers? How do you get in all of your offices and re-image those and fix all those, those infrastructure pieces that are required? And how do you do that on a global scale? Again, I'm going to go back to cloud. Brian's answer is cloud. My answer is cloud PCs. That's the answer. It's the simple way.
This seems like the perfect solution, really, for a ransomware recovery. I know we've learned a lot. We've learned so much, but we're starting to run out of time here. I do want to get to a few of the audience's questions before we go. And while we take those questions, I want to get everyone's feedback on this poll, and that is, what additional information would you like from this event about the Workspot solution, the NetApp solution? Would you like some customer case studies of other companies, such as Matt's, that have done this in the past? Would you like some pricing details, maybe your own personal demo of exactly how this would work if you were hit by ransomware? You know, what buttons would you push to recover to make this possible? We want to get your feedback on this. And so let's go ahead and start our audience Q&A session here. There's a ton of great questions coming in. I'm going to start with this one. This one is for you, Brian. They're asking, if my data is in several locations, how would I make this available to the cloud PCs specifically?
That's a wonderful question. I think, listen, first of all, the cloud PCs are really, really important. I think most people and organizations focus on the data and their servers, okay? And they, in large part, overlook the PCs because, like Matt said, hey, I don't want to have another stack of box PCs in my cabinet. It's not cost effective. So now you deploy those PCs. They're also running in the cloud. Well, guess what? Your storage device is running in the cloud. The cloud PC is running in the cloud. And as Matt said, that can be any cloud you want. And certainly from the storage, it can be any cloud you want as well. And so what we really recommend is having part of your plan is almost a product-based insurance policy where not only do you have your plan, you've got your data air gapped out there in the cloud, you've got your little tiny storage device breathing, but you've got the networking and that kind of stuff set up so that when you click that button to light up your cloud PCs in a minute or an hour, however long it takes, now you've got your data, you've got your servers, and you've got your users back online, and it's all running in that cloud. And like Matt said, you can access that via any web browser, your iPads, your wife's device at home, whatever it is, and you can get that clean environment that's not reinfecting things anymore as well.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And this is another maybe point of clarification here. They're asking, if I'm not in the cloud today, how can I use cloud PCs if I need to recover from ransomware?
Yeah, so you can stand up an environment today and have cloud PCs ready to go, and then there are ways that we can connect to that data, wherever that data may be, on-prem or in the cloud. A perfect scenario is to get that data to the cloud. But if you're not in the cloud today, it doesn't mean that you can't take advantage specifically of what we do with using cloud PCs. So your end goal obviously would be to get there, but you can have some comfort in knowing that you can still be protected, as you're working on that digital transformation strategy.
Got it. Okay. And what about, they're wanting to know here, if I have different types of applications and different types of users, and every company does out there, how are cloud PCs going to work for me in that scenario?
So different applications,
different end user demands. Yeah, you've got accounting, you've got point of sale, you've got graphic designers.
I'm gonna throw a plug in here. One of the reasons that that I chose when I was a CIO to do business with Workspot was because Workspot brought the expertise to the table. And so I'm answering this question, directly, wearing my old CIO hat and just, being completely frank about it. They spent the past 5 years perfecting, the cloud PC space. I couldn't get that from anybody else. And I'm just going to be honest and say that there's no other vendor out there that's going to come in and be a true extension of my technology team and take me from having no cloud PC environment, not having much of a digital presence, to that digital transformation of rolling it out and being all in. So we started out with a pilot of, I think it was 30 end users that we started testing with. And at the end of that, we rolled that out to 500 people. And it was because of the expertise that they had. That Workspot customer success team wasn't just working with me. They were working with lots of other customers across different industries, not just AEC, but other industries. And it was the 5 years of experience that they brought with all the different applications, all the different programs, the different types of storage devices and data sets. And because they were doing that for 5 years, I got to take the benefit of saying, hey, can you come into my environment and can you make this as easy as possible? Here's where I want to go and here's what I need to deliver. Help me get there. And it's exactly what they did. They were able to walk me through, okay, let's make these tweaks. Let's do this. Be aware of this application. Do this here, do that there. They were able to make it easy. So that's why.
And that's what we need. We need a lot more easy in the world of technology. And it's so great you've had firsthand experience with this. And I think this question kind of goes along with that. You know, you talked about recovering applications and data with cloud PCs up and running in an hour or less. They're wanting to know, how can that really be possible?
Okay. It's possible because once Brian gets you access back to your data and you've got that good, clean copy, now we're going to focus on getting your end users connected back to that data. So as I mentioned earlier, what you're going to do is you're going to take your corporate image and you're going to have, that ready to go in this isolated environment. So you're going to create this template so that in the event of an attack, and by the way, that template, you're going to keep that updated at whatever frequency you guys choose as part of your plan. You're going to keep that updated and ready to go so that if something happens, you are able to deploy machines in a matter of minutes. And really, I mean, it's a couple clicks. Brian was talking about snapshots just being as fast as the click. And it's the same. Well, what you're waiting on is those machines in that cloud, IaaS environment to be built. That's what's taking the time, not you actually clicking, here's my template, go build these machines. So you've got this environment that is isolated, that is your environment, that is kept up to date by your technology team, that is ready to go. That's how you get your image and your applications quickly connected back to your data so that you can continue to work.
Awesome. Just awesome. Well, we're reaching the top of the hour. I hope everyone out there in the audience has responded to the poll. We do want to get your feedback on this before we go. I really want to give a special thanks to our expert presenters today, Brian from NetApp and Matt from Workspot. Thank you so much for your expertise and wisdom.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Again, don't forget about the handouts tab. I encourage everyone to respond to the poll before you go. And of course, thank you to Workspot and NetApp for supporting us on the event. Brian and Matt, I hope to see you next time. Have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. And then finally, I do want to announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. This is going out to our prize winner, Jeff Fulkerson from Illinois. Congratulations. We'll reach out to you to deliver that prize, and we'll also be reaching out to our best question prize winner. I hope everyone learned a lot on this event today, a hot topic in the world of technology. Make sure that you have your ransomware recovery plan ready to go and tested. And we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.